corruption. So ongoing global economic scandals, endemic corruption, human exploitation, and environmental degradation seem to indicate that technological and economic developments have outpaced the spiritual and moral consciousness of the times. Development must be driven by a moral vision and a commitment to ethical principles, and religious and spiritual leaders can and should be involved in applying their gifts in service of the greater good. This session discusses the application of principles in the public sphere and ways to drive moral innovation for a sustainable future. So I'd like to introduce here today our moderator, Gail Hambleton. Gail is the Director of Interfaith Partnerships for the Global Peace Foundation. She is also the Director of the Interfaith Alliance to Abolish Human Trafficking Safe Haven Campaign, a project of GPF. Gail has worked for decades in various international NGOs, many of which were involved in interfaith peace efforts. She lived and worked in Africa for 8 years, serving in the mission and humanitarian aid fields. Her passion for peace through interfaith cooperation is rooted in her difficult experiences during the war in Zimbabwe, the military coup in Kenya, and the aftermath of genocide in Rwanda. Gail was instrumental in establishing the humanitarian aid organization Women for Women in Rwanda in 1997. Gail is also the mother of 3 beautiful children. Please welcome Gail. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'd like to welcome all of you. It's been quite a day, and how are your brains? Can you take a little bit more? There's been so much wisdom poured out today. But I'm very excited about our session this afternoon. Tamami read the synopsis or the theme of our session. But what I'm excited about is each one of our speakers, their lives and their experience and their work is really a best practice and an example of our theme, the application of principles in the public square and ways to drive moral innovation for a sustainable future. So each of our speakers will come up to the podium here, and our first speaker will be Dr. Chandra Sitiawan. He's the founder and chairman of the Global Peace Festival Indonesia Foundation, coordinator of the Presidium of Matakin, the Supreme Council of Confucian Religion in Indonesia, and the founder of the Indonesian Conference on Religion and Peace. He is also commissioner of the KPPU Commission for the Supervision of Business Competition, Republic of Indonesia. He was previously the rector of the Institute of Business and Informatics Indonesia, as well as the commissioner of the Indonesia National Commission on Human Rights. Let's welcome Dr. Chandra.
Thank you, moderator, distinguished participants, panelists. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom. It's a great pleasure for me to present the first here. Today, the topic that the committee gave it to me is the living for the greater good, the moral foundations for inspiring innovative change. Okay, next. So my presentations, I will this scope of my presentations, and we start with the introductions. I believe different people see life differently, and each of us has to find our own pathway to meaning. The meaning of life should not be something abstract, but should help us to live our own unique life to the fullest. This is important, and I still believe religions have the functions. So religious people will find that faith in God gives them give their life meaning and purpose and helps them to find courage and strength to face problems and to bear suffering and disaster. The problem now, what that it means by to be a good person? Yeah. Next. What does it means by to be a good person? Why should I be good? Why I cannot I just live as I please? These answers will be different with anybody of you maybe. But in fact, if we realize this, it is because being a good means being human. Human nature is good. Humans are originally good. This is by Mencius' perspective, Confucius' perspective. If we try to choose or we choose some other way, sooner or later we will face the consequences of our choice. Next. So I will use the Confucian perspectives to analyze this, to view about a good person. To start discuss the way of human beings, we must start with a moral concept. In Confucian, they call it virtue. Yeah. The ability and power must also be cultivated by individuals, and thus became a moral making property of persons that is able to give the persons physical power or influence over others, and sometimes even over one's non-human surrounding. The concept of virtues. Virtue is not only a quality, but also an ability to transform oneself and a power to transform others. Life as a whole is a process of development from the latter to the former, the goals of which is to become a Sikh or to become a superior man, Chunche in the Confucius terminology. A Sikh is believed to have manifested the greatest virtue which corresponds to Almighty God, and to have been given the blessing of God. So, become a superior man is a morally perfect and intellectually brilliant, and it's in carrying out the way of human in the human world, the man extensively confers benefits on the people and send relief to all. Superior man Chunche is the ideal person who any of us, rich or poor, any race, has the potential to become. Okay? The superior man learns in order to attain the utmost of his principles. Everything puts forth his utmost endeavors. The superior man must make his thoughts sincere. Yeah. So, required is that in what he says, that may be nothing inaccurate. Yeah. Even when alone, the superman must be watchful over himself. Yeah, this is very important. The object of the superior man is truth. He is Catholic and not partisan, and thinks of virtue. Yeah. Superman wishes to be slow in the words and earnest in his conduct. So this is also important. And the superior man has neither anxiety nor fear. So he is correctly firm and not merely firm. Next. So the superior man is affable but not adulatory. The progress of the superman is upward. This is very important. The progress of ordinary man is downward. Upward, it means the philosophy that already in his or her continuous improvement. Today must be better than yesterday. Yesterday, tomorrow will be better than today. That is very important. So next. So the superior man seeks to develop the immeasurable qualities of man and does not seek to develop their evil qualities. Yeah. The superior man honors talents and virtue and bears with all. He praises the good and pities the incompetent. He does not promote a man on account of his words, nor does he put aside good words on account of the man. To be able to judge others which is in ourselves, this may be called the art of virtue. He cultivates to the utmost the capabilities of his nature and exercises them on the principle of reciprocity. This is very important. Reciprocity. Yeah. Do not impose on others what you yourself do not desire. Next. The practice of right living is deemed to the highest. Complete virtue takes first place. The doing of anything else whatsoever is subordinate. So the experiment conforms with the path of the mean, not extreme, balance. How to be balanced is very important, not being extreme. It means if you live not for others, all of your life for others, but also must be for yourself. Must be balanced. It's very important. Next. So from the highest to the lowest self-development must be deemed the root of all by every man. When the root is neglected, it cannot be that what springs from it will be well ordered. This is from the great learning in the 4 books of the Confucius teachings. To pursue the art of life was possible for every man, all being of like patience, and it's more things like that difference. Yeah. So Confucius revealed the process step by step by which self-development is attained and by which it flows over into the common life to serve the state and to bless mankind. I want to read this ayat, this article. The ancients, when they wished to exemplify illustrious virtue throughout the world, he first ordered well their states. Desiring to order well their states, they first regulated their families. Wishing to regulate their families, they first cultivated themselves. Wishing to cultivate themselves, they first rectified their purposes. Wishing to rectify their purposes, they first sought to think sincerely. Wishing to think sincerely, they first extended their knowledge as widely as possible. This they did by investigations of things. Next. By investigating of things, their knowledge became extensive. Their knowledge being extensive, their thoughts became sincere. Their thoughts being sincere, their purposes were rectified. Their purposes being rectified, they cultivate themselves. They being cultivated, their families were regulated. Their families being regulated, their states were rightly governed. Their states being rightly governed, the world was thereby tranquil and prosperous. And to implement living for the greatest goods as the moral foundations for inspiring innovative change, we should uphold these values. Yeah. Investigations of phenomena, this is very important. Learning, sincerity, rectitude of purpose, self-development, family disciplines, local self-government, universal self-government. And last, if we bring these five virtues, five values, we will accept it anywhere when we go. This is constitutes of benevolent actually. One, respect, magnanimity, sincerity, earnestness, kindness. With respect, you will avoid insult. With respect. With magnanimity, you will win over everyone. Yeah. With sincerity, man will trust you. Yeah. Other people will trust you. With earnestness, you will have achievement. With kindness, you will be well fitted to command others. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chandra. Dr. Chandra gave us a wonderful definition of being human. He said to be good is to be human. I love that. We had a convention in Kenya 3 years ago, and I was involved in an interactive group, and we were asking people to describe themselves in 3 bullet points, and there were about 50 people in the room, and long story short, there was one person who described himself as human. You know, others were saying, I'm Christian, I'm, a mother, I'm a father, I'm this, that. But one person said, I'm human. And we asked, where are you from? And he was from Rwanda and had gone through the genocide. So he learned how to go to the deepest identity of being human. So thank you. Let's give Dr. Chandra another hand. Our second speaker is Dr. Tawfiq Chowdhury, founder and president, Mercy Mission World. Dr. Chowdhury is the chairman and CEO of the Mercy Mission movement. Mercy Mission is one of the world's fastest growing social service enterprises, delivering innovative educational and social service programs to millions of people across the world. Dr. Chowdhury is a world-renowned Islamic scholar, as well as being an emergency specialist medical doctor in Australia. He is world-renowned speaker on Islamic social entrepreneurship, as well as business and corporate strategy and organizational development. He has recently been named as one of the top 500 most influential Muslims in the world. Let's welcome Dr. Chowdhury.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our session today in this really interesting and very appropriate forum that we have. This is a presentation on wealth, on business and commerce, and people and their reasons for getting into corporate business and commerce worldwide. I want to start off this question by asking this really important question. Why is it that the world today revolves around making money? For what reason are we in business? What is the reason for which we struggle and strive every single day to do what we do in making all the money that we do worldwide? If you ask any company out there, they're very clear on what they want to do. We want to increase shareholder value. We want to be every single book in the world under 60 seconds, that's Amazon. We are in the business of making kids happy, that's Disney. They know what they want to do, but the question is why. Peter Senge says in his book, The Fifth Discipline, the question of why cannot be answered. And that's the real tragedy today. That today we can come to a conclusion that the most important reason for why we get out of bed today is the question that cannot be answered at all. And yet, Harvard Business Review says this. According to the Harvard Business Review, it says the single biggest motivator, for success in any endeavor, in any field, is the answer to the question why. If anyone out there, any motivator, any leader, any CEO, any president can explain why, yes, we can. Why? You know, if they, if they can answer why, then I'll tell you what, people will jump out of their beds to get up in the morning on Monday morning, and they will not feel that Mondayitis or the Friday syndrome of, you know, super happy on Friday and super crappy on Monday. They will not feel that. They will love their Mondays and hate their Fridays. And the problem is we just have no idea. Do you know what the problem is today? Today we tell people different reasons of why. Why are we in business? Because we're going to increase shareholder value. Can you imagine any employee in your 100,000 people organization jumping out of bed saying, yeah, I'm going to go and increase shareholder value today? What? This cannot be the purpose of why we're in business. This cannot be the purpose of why we struggle and strive and compete in the way that we do. This cannot be the reason why we do this. If anything, humanity should have taught us that money should not be gained for the purpose of money itself. It's for what that money will help us achieve. The outcome is what is more important than the internal value of money itself. If we can answer the question why, believe me, the world will move at a faster pace towards solving its problems. Just like when you press down on the accelerator, you can rev at 1,000, 2,000 RPM. But if you can answer why, then you will inspire energy and action in humanity. The common people will become agents of change, and they will understand the reason why they're doing what they're doing. And this is the failing of our leaders today, that they have yet to give us the energy of why, and so we rev on 500 RPM. I think my car goes at 500 RPM, but we should be running at 8 or 9. Move on. Look at this picture. Knowing a clear why gives us clear clarity and direction and focus of where we should be headed. Not understanding why we're doing what we're doing gives us a huge fuzzy picture of the future. We just don't know what we want to do. Why are we doing it? Who's next? So if you are an Apple employee becoming the most richest company in the history of mankind, I mean, each Apple share is more than an iPad. Can you imagine that? This is how expensive the company is. And if you cannot answer why Apple exists and why Steve Jobs lived his life, if you cannot answer why and have a extremely moral why, then your life is only as good as that iPad. And you need to have far more value than that. You know, the most amazing thing is that my glasses have a purpose. My shirt, my jacket has a purpose. My shirt has a purpose. This phone in front of me recording my talk has a purpose. This microphone has a purpose. Everything seems to have a clear purpose and a clear why. But this human being, this noble human being in front of me has no clear purpose. This is incomprehensible. And this cannot be the level of intelligence that we as human beings have reached. After so much advances and so much knowledge, we must be far more clearer on the why rather than just simply the what we do. Look at this man. Hardly your impression of the most inspiring leader. He's not handsome. He's not a hunk. He's not the most eloquent. He was an introvert, not the 85% extrovert leaders that we have today. Yet he inspired a nation to throw out a kingdom upon which the sun never set. And this is Mahatma Gandhi, a man who inspired a nation of millions of people through simple things as not eating salt, not wearing so-and-so clothes, abstinence from violence. Unbelievable. So if we can learn from some of these people who have changed countries, we will learn that indeed it is this understanding of why people do what they do that will inspire positive change and truly be able to answer the moral dilemmas that we live in today. You see, this is a crystal clear picture of what will happen if we have a why. One drop of water in the whole pond that will ripple with effect and create a huge tsunami. And this is what we're missing today, my dear friends. I dare say that this is what is missing in our purpose today, in our lives today, a clear reason of why we're in what we do. And corporations that run NMCs, multinational companies MNCs that run the world today, not countries that run the world. It's the MNCs that run the world. They need to have clarity on the why. And the more their CEOs are directionless on the why, the more they will run their companies and the countries in which they work aground. So again, why? Because without a strong why, this is what happens. Move on, please. Keep pressing because there's a lot of slides. No, go back. This is, back. Okay, slow. Next one. Oh, okay, so PowerPoint is not showing clearly. Anyway, I had a really sophisticated, really nice PowerPoint slide here. It's not showing very clearly, but basically we're at A. If you have no understanding of why, you're either one of two people. You'll either end up like this orange circle going here and there, left, right, and center. We're doing this today, tomorrow that. Okay, we're innovating and this and that. Finally, by some mercy from God, you'll end up somewhere with some progress. But you wasted so much resources and time trying to get there. The second way that could happen to you is if by some success you follow a competition that has a clear purpose, you tend to go towards your B, but then you go up and down all the way, wasting so much time and resources towards your vision and your final destination. On the other hand, if you're clear on your why, you go from A to B directly and you solve the problem at the least of concerns, at the least of time wastage and resource wastage. This is my experience with my life. When I myself was a young man, and I'm still a young, but when I was younger and a teenager and I had no clarity and purpose of what I was doing with my life, I was like a chicken with my head cut off. Have you seen a chicken when you cut the head off? What does it do? It's jumping up and down, left, right, and center. It doesn't know where to go. And that's precisely how our youth are today, directionless. If our schools do not give them direction, do not give them vision, and inspiring them purpose, then they will end up becoming like these people. Moving on. So a rocking horse makes a lot of movement but little progress. And this is truly what is happening with the world today. Lots of movement towards something or the other. But good Lord, towards what? And this is the challenge that we have, and leaders today, my respected leaders, and you're all leaders in your fields, in your own spheres of influence, my sincere request is to take time out. Take your shoes off, walk on the grass, look at the prairies, look at the greenery, and think about, why am I doing what I'm doing? Take a day off work and actually think about it. My request to all the CEOs of the world is be crystal clear on you leading this 1 million conglomerate, this army of 1 million people that is providing values and services to humanity. If only they were clear on the why, they would be so much more effective at solving moral dilemmas and problems of humanity today. Moving on. So why are we in business? I'm sure everyone's like, okay, come on, Tawfiq, just tell us why. Why don't you just tell us? Okay, so I've got a bit of a shocking picture. Go ahead. Just before that, go ahead. This is a statement. Before that, please, go back. So you're giving away all my suspense. Okay, next one, please. No, next. Okay, that's it. Okay, all right. This is an important statement of Prophet Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam. He said, everyone is helped by Allah, Allah meaning God, if they do what they have been created for. And that's true. That's what we find today. That if someone focuses on something and really pursues what they really want to do, they do end up achieving it. And that's the whole point. That if we only had that clarity of purpose, we would then achieve exactly what we set out to achieve. So exactly why are we in business? So it's that picture. What's that picture? So I found this picture on the internet, which I don't know from where. It looks really amazing picture. I don't know from which prison this is, but I thought it illustrated my point exactly. And that point is that these are all these people praying, and some of them might have been drug addicts, some of them might have been killers, some of them might have done so many different types of crimes. But you can all, and every sort of person can find purpose in some sort of religion. They can find direction, they can find absolvement of their sins, they can find clarity of vision, they can turn over a new leaf. And this is the real blessing of having morality based upon a religion. And that is, it gives you clarity of purpose. And this is the first reason why we should be in business, is that it should give you clarity of vision and purpose. The reason why you're doing it should be for a higher moral purpose. Whatever your reason is, but it should be for that higher moral purpose. The second reason is this. What's this? These are the children and the humanity of the world. That's the second reason why we do what we do, which is to help the people of this world. I'm about to finish, and I'm going to take one more minute just because of all the slight changes, if you don't mind. So according to the IMF, the number of people that are chronically hungry worldwide is 1.2 billion people in the year 2011. Okay? They published a report that said chronic hunger. What is chronic hunger? The gastric empty time of the tummy is about 4 hours. So chronic hunger is anyone who has not enough food for more than 4 hours, right? So you get only one meal. So that's chronic hunger. That means you are, you suffer all types of malnutrition. 1.2 billion people, that's 1 in 6 people on this earth is chronically hungry. That's a shame upon humanity, especially given the following fact. What is the cost of removing extreme poverty from this world today? The cost that was published by Oxfam in the report in 2012, they published a report, they said $60 billion is all it's going to take to remove extreme poverty so that we can provide water, sanitation, and we can provide basic health, such as, which is immunizations, stop those diseases. So that's remove extreme poverty and a roof over their head. 60 billion for 1.2 billion people. Economics of scale will play into the factor, and so 1.2 billion people will be looked after. But here is the dilemma. What is the dilemma? The profit, I'm just talking about the profit. Yeah, the profit of the world's 100, I'm not even talking about the whole world, of the 100 world's richest people in 2012 was 240 billion. Meaning in just 1 year, if they just donated 25% of their profit of 1 year, we could end extreme poverty in this world. Now, will you tell me, please, why is it that they're not doing it? I'll tell you why. Because they don't know why they're in business. They've got no idea. So therefore, my respected elders and my respected gentlemen and gentlewomen, if we can answer this problem, just answer the question why, we'll solve all these problems. That's my statement today. Thank you.
Why? Did you forget your phone? Wow. That made us think, didn't it? That was excellent. Very dynamic. Thank you so much. Let's give another hand for Dr. Chowdhury. So, why do we want peace? Does anyone ever call you Mr. Y? That was great. Thank you so much. I'm very, very pleased to be able to introduce to you our next speaker. If you haven't heard of the Global Peace Index, get ready. This is really an incredible tool, very unique and creative tool given to us in this time. So our next speaker is Ms. Camilla Shippa, who is the Director of Institute for Economics and Peace. She's from Australia. She's the Institute for Economics and Peace produces the Global Peace Index. She has over 15 years of professional experience in building new initiatives for development and peace, guiding public and private partnerships, leading teams, and cooperating vast public outreach efforts. Her first-hand experience is in intergovernmental organizations, philanthropic strategy, and academic research. Camilla is also a member of numerous expert groups, including the UN's Expert Reference Group for the Global Consultation on Conflict, Violence, and Disaster in the post-2015 Development Agenda. Her career has been instrumental in creating many pivotal partnerships between foundations, civil society, and the private sector in Southeast Asia. Let's welcome Ms. Camilla Shippa.
Thank you. Thank you for that generous introduction, and thank you for the organizers for inviting me here today, and to all of you to be still here resisting this long day of speeches. I would like to start my presentation today by getting us to reflect on a question. We're here at a peace conference, and we use the word peace commonly in our languages. Yet, what do we really know about peace? Peace is not germane to any university courses worldwide that I've been able to identify. There are profound works on the literature of peace, yet there's no peace literature course in any university. We know that peace and economics are strongly interrelated, yet I haven't been able to find a chair in peace economics. Now, there has been a multiplication of peace and conflict centers at universities around the world. But if you look at the curricula closely, what they are studying is conflict. We keep on focusing on the negative, what we don't want. Very little focus on what we do actually want. I worked at the United Nations for over a decade. I don't remember one single meeting discussing peace, but numerous, endless meetings talking about conflict, why countries fall into conflict, how to help them recover after conflict. Now think about the medical science. Of course, the cure of disease is important. Of course, we need to study cancer and how to cure cancer. But it wasn't until the medical science actually focused on the healthy body that we learned what we need to do to keep healthy, good diet and exercise. In the same way, the study of peace needs to accompany the study of conflict. Next slide, please. So the Institute for Economics and Peace, where I work, focuses on measuring peace. Our focus is to strip peace of its utopian connotation to really make it a tangible measure, an achievable policy objective for governments. Without measurement, in fact, how do we know whether our actions are helping or hindering the achievement of our goals? In order to measure peace, next slide please, we need to define it. And while people will not agree on a definition of peace, the only way to measure it was to define it with what is termed by peace scientists as negative peace, the absence of violence and the absence of the fear of violence. We also want to study positive peace, and I'll talk about it a little bit later on, and how we derive to that through the measurement of the absence of violence, and so negative peace. Next slide. The Global Peace Index has been now produced for 7 years. It ranks 162 nations according to their relative states of peace, using 22 indicators, which are a mixture of both qualitative and quantitative indicators. To guarantee the independence of the index, we don't work alone. We, in fact, engage a team of experts that are independent. They're statistical and peace experts that help us define the indicators and the weights assigned to them. And then we work with another external body called the Economist Intelligence Unit to help collate and collect the data. Next slide. The 22 indicators that I use can be broadly grouped in 3 categories. 5 are measures of ongoing conflict, both internal and external to a country. 10 are measures of safety within a society, say the number of homicides or terrorist activity. And then the last 7 are measures of militarization. Next slide, please. Here is a snapshot of the state of peace in 2013. Now, why is this kind of analysis important? It's not necessarily important to show who's at the top and who's at the bottom. We pretty much know that. What it's important for is that it really gets us to understand trends. Now, we live today in an era which is more peaceful than any other in our history. Yet, what is important is that if we track peace over the past 6 years, we can see there has been a 5% deterioration. And that's what makes these type of conferences, like here today, of particular importance. Next slide, please. It can also help us look at the distribution of peace. And we can see that over the past 6 years, peace have become more dispersed. Basically, looking at this, this chart, when you look at the red line, you are seeing 2013. And you can see there's a longer tail, which basically indicates that the country that was least peaceful in 2013 was less peaceful than the country that was the least in 2008. So things are getting slightly worse. The index can also show why this deterioration, in fact, is driven by a worsening in the internal indicators. So externally, countries are doing fine, but internally, we have seen more conflict. In fact, this is the indicator that deteriorated the most. And you can see the difference between 2007, 37,000 deaths from internal conflict, and 2012, 178,000, driven by conflicts such as Libya and Syria. Now, what I've shown so far, which is the Global Peace Index, which is an analysis of trends in peace, can tell us whether there's been a short-term progress or deterioration in peace. But on its own, doesn't tell us anything about what countries need to do to sustain peace in the long term. However, it is thanks to the vast amount of data that we have been able to collect by developing the Global Peace Index that we have been able, for the first time, to empirically derive what are the characteristics, the structures, the attitudes, the institutions that nations need in order to sustain peace in the long term. We've called this analysis the pillars of peace. And what we have done is that we have analyzed over 4,700 variables, looking at an incredible number of different aspects. And from here, we have been able to derive a taxonomy of the elements that sustain peace, which is statistically based. Next slide, please. And here it is. We're calling it the pillars of peace. It looks like a flower. It's got all those lines. Before I go through each one of them, what do the lines represent? Each of those elements is closely interrelated. They cannot exist, they cannot sustain peace by themselves. It's like a brick wall. This is what the stats are showing us. So think about a brick wall. If you take out just one brick, the whole structure is weakened. It's the same with this. What are the structures? Starting from the top and going clockwise, well-functioning government, which is looking both at efficiency and the rule of law, as well as how the government is open and communicative with the citizens. Equitable distribution of resources, both financial as well as health and education. Free flow of information in a society. A sound business environment. High levels of human capital, really meaning the stock of knowledge of the population, the citizenry. Acceptance of the rights of others, very pertinent to the discussions that you're having here today. This is really looking at the levels of tolerance of the other, linguistic, ethnic, religious, etc. Low levels of corruption, and good relations with neighbors. In here meant as a neighboring state, a neighboring province, etc. This approach really shows that positive peace is multidimensional. So this is what we need to achieve positive peace, to have to focus on in countries if we want them to maintain the levels of peace or indeed come out of violence and progress. Next slide, please. Again here, a quick look. We can track, we can measure based on all the indicators that make up each of the pillars, the strength of those institutions in various countries. What is actually important to me on this map is, I don't know if you can see the amount of gray. Gray means no data. Coming back to my first point, for the countries where we need it the most, we don't have the information, we don't have the data, it's not accessible. We do not measure what we want, we do not measure what we need, which is what I'm doing with the UN, is trying to call for more and better data collection so that we can further analyze. What happens when you put negative peace and positive peace together? You would think that all the countries would align along that red line, if you understand scatter plots. However, we can see that there are countries that are either above the red line or below, what we call positive peace deficit, countries which seem to have a higher level of peace than their structures would allow for, or under the red line, a surplus. So countries that seem to have those institutions, as we have measured them, but are living in violence. Why is that? What does that tell us? Well, we've also looked at this, next slide please, over time. And here is the movement of countries over 6 years. On the top were those countries that didn't have the structures. or the structures weren't as developed as the level of peace, what's happened? All those red lines, they have fallen into violence. The bigger fallers were the ones that have biggest positive peace deficit: Syria, Rwanda, Madagascar, and Egypt. Now, since I have 3 minutes left, I'm going to go on to a separate and a different area of our work. And I'm going to be very brief, but I thought I wanted to mention this because you might find it of interest. The Institute for Economics and Peace has developed a methodology to measure the cost of violence to our world economy. Measure violence as a discrete industry, just like we do with education, like we do with health, like we do with agriculture. Just to give a sense of how much of the economic pie the world is dedicated to dealing with the consequences and with prevention of violence. Now, keep in mind that this study is incredibly conservative because we have only counted direct costs. So let's say somebody puts fire to a school. We're only counting the money that it would cost to rebuild that school. We're not counting the money of the economic pie lost by lost wages of the teachers, for example. So conservative in that sense, and conservative also in the sense that we have only counted what is possible to count, and we know there's many other items that we haven't been able to count. What have we come up with? Estimated cost of violence to the world today is $9.46 trillion. In other words, 11% of gross world product in 2012. That equals, just to put it in perspective, because trillions are big numbers, $25 billion a day. Now, we are not saying that we don't need to spend money on containing violence. Of course we need police. Of course we need jails. But what is the right amount? Violence containment expenditure is not productive, doesn't give us the same return on investment that building a school would. So should we spend so much on it? If we just compare it to other industries, basically violence containment is bigger than the world airline industry, the world tourism industry, and the world agriculture sector put together. And here is my last slide. I've said it's not very productive. Could we convince policymakers to look at trying to reduce violence containment expenditure, even by a small percentage, and then very importantly, invest that saving into those pillars of peace that I showed before, the elements that help build peace in a society: education, health, distribution of resources, anti-corruption measures. That in turn would reduce violence, which in turn would reduce violence containment expenditure and initiate what we are calling a virtuous cycle of reducing violence and violence containment spending, and we think everybody would benefit from that. Thank you very much. That's mine.
Whoa. Thank you very much. That felt like a little taste, and I want more. Very, very interesting. Let's give Ms. Camilla Chippa another round of applause. Very, very interesting, especially as she started out of how there's always such a focus on conflict and not a focus on peace. And that last section was extremely interesting also. I felt like maybe your organization needs to have a display so that we can take more time and read and understand it more deeply. Thank you. Our next speaker is actually a representative of the Sultan Mohammed Saad Akubakar, the Sultan of Sokoto. But the representative, the man who's speaking today, is the Honorable Barrister Bello Mohammed, who is a member of the Sokoto State House of Assembly. But he is here representing the Sultan of Sokoto, so I'm going to read a little bit about the Sultan. He is the religious leader of Nigeria's 8 million Muslims and of millions of Muslims in adjoining countries in West Africa. He serves as President General of the Nigerian Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs. His role continues the leadership of the Sokoto Caliphate that unified the region under Islamic law in the early 19th century. He is the son of the 17th Sultan of Sokoto. Can't say that name. He is I'll skip over that. He is a descendant of Sheikh Usman Dan Fodio, the founder of the Sokoto Caliphate. He began his military career in 1975 and has been primarily involved in leading missions focused on peacekeeping and conflict resolution. Prior to his appointment as Sultan in 2006, he was Nigeria's defense advisor in Pakistan with a concurrent accreditation to Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, and the Gulf states. The Sultan in Nigeria has become very, very engaged in the One Family Under God campaign, and so he felt it was really important. He was not able to come himself, and he felt it was really important to be represented. So we are very honored to greet our next speaker, who has come to give the greeting of the Sultan, Honorable Barrister Mello Mohammed.
Distinguished panelists, fellow participants, and ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. First and foremost, the moderator has already sent in the message. I'm here not in my capacity as Bello Muhammad, but I'm wearing the shoes of His Eminence, the Sultan of Sokoto, Alhaji Muhammad Saad Abubakar III. His Eminence had wanted to be here personally, but because of emerging issues and very important occasions that affect state matters, he could not be able to be here personally. But he assured that his spirit is with you. His Eminence, though has not written any speech, but has mandated me to pass his goodwill message on behalf of himself and the Muslim Ummah of Nigeria and other sub-Saharan Africa. He's extending his goodwill message and to tell you that he wishes you peaceful and successful deliberations. To say a little, he sent me with some books that he wrote. And to me, these books preach about peace, unity, knowledge, and good leadership. He wrote so many books. He presented so many lectures in Harvard University, in Abuja during the workshop of the Christian Association of Nigeria. He presented a paper on good neighborliness. He presented another paper on peacekeeping or peace building in Africa, in West Africa, in Harvard University, Massachusetts, USA. And he wrote a book on leadership, The Principles of Leadership, which talks about foundation of leadership, the qualities of a leader, the leadership and relations with governmental affairs, the struggle of leadership in fight against corruption. That is the content of that book on leadership. This is the book, which I'm going to present to the leadership of the Global Peace Foundation. And the other two big books, or two lecture synopses, is on Islam and peacekeeping in West Africa, which I'm sure the moderator has one. And then this one is on you and your Muslim neighbor, which was a paper presented at the Christian Association of Nigeria workshop in Abuja, Nigeria. So to sum it all, the caliphate of Osman Dan Fodio, which highlighted by the moderator, has all along been on the principles of learning. The learning is what is the emphasis of that, leadership. I mean, the throne was built on leadership, fairness, equity, and justice. This is based on the principles of Islam. And the cardinal principle of Islam, as you all know, is that there must be fairness, there must be equity, there must be just. The leader must be just. And therefore, the word Islam, its own, means peace. Peace. Therefore, this works and synopsis has x-rayed most of the attributes of good governance, of good leadership, of searching for knowledge. Osman Dan Fodio and his disciples, that is Muhammad Bello and Abdullah Ngondu, wrote about 300 books on different aspects of life. And this knowledge is not limited to only men, but extend to women. His daughter, Nana Asma'u, that is Osman bin Fodio's daughter, wrote about 70 books on different aspects of life. So I believe the Sultaness has been doing good. Apart from him being the President General for Islamic Affairs in Nigeria, he is also the co-chairman of Interreligious Council in Nigeria. He is number 25 of the most influential Muslims in the world, which my brother is also a member. I believe this attribute has gone a long way in giving a lot of, creating a lot of interface, a lot of awareness on both religions. And because of his military career, he participated in all this peacekeeping and peace building. He has been able to serve in so many capacities, as highlighted by the moderator. It has given him a lot of, advantage in preaching peace all over globally. So with this few remarks, as I highlighted initially, I don't have a paper to present, but I'm here to give the message of His Eminence. He asked me to tell you that he wishes you best of luck and peaceful deliberation in this very important conference. Thank you, and wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much. It's really an honor, and it feels really good to have the blessing of the Sultan. I never met him, but it feels good. And thank you for coming all this way. Our last speaker for our session is Mr. James Patton. He's the Executive Vice President of the International Center for Religion and Diplomacy. This nonprofit organization is one that I deeply, deeply respect. It's one of my favorites. And the founder is Douglas Johnston, who is on Global Peace Foundation's Global Advisory Council. But let me tell you about James. James Patton is the Executive Vice President. He has worked designing, implementing, and monitoring multi-stakeholder programs to promote economic development and mitigate violent conflict for decades in many, many countries, for over 20 years in a dozen different countries. Prior to joining ICRD, Mr. Patton worked as a Foreign Affairs Officer of the United States Department of State with the USAID's Office of Conflict Management and Mitigation, and as a Deputy Regional Director of the Andean region for the American Friends Service Committee. Mr. Patton holds a Master of Law and Diplomacy from Tufts University, Fletcher School, and a Master of Divinity focusing on social justice theology from Harvard Divinity School. Let's welcome Mr. James Patton.
How's everybody doing? Ooh. Oh, I got a tough crowd. I know it's late in the day. We've heard a lot. This is an incredible group of peacemakers that we have here. We've heard a lot of technical stuff and aspirational stuff and value-related stuff, so I'm just going to tell some stories, if that's okay with y'all, and send you off to dinner with some things, hopefully, to think about. I'm going to frame them, however, in the context of a question. And the question is, what does it mean to be a religious peacemaker? I work in conflict, so my focus of the discussion will be around conflict questions, if that's all right with you. The most common theme that I've heard here on this topic is we all have shared values that we need to identify. We need to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of the other or wear the hat of the other and find where we connect. In other words, empathy. Develop empathy with the other. And thereby we can work with one another to create peace in the world. I want to challenge us as religious peacemakers to truly understand what this means, because peace is not constructed with our friends. Peace is constructed with our enemies. And it is easy to work together when you have those shared values. The hard work comes when the morality that we have is different. And if we cannot find a way to extend our empathy to those whose values differ from ours, even if they have values that we find to be destructive or grotesque or offensive, then we will not be able to connect with them, engage with them, and transform both them, their behaviors, and the world. So my organization, ICRD, has worked during its 14-year history in over a dozen countries around the world, including working with Pakistani madrasas to help transform the educational content and bring in critical thinking skills, working to reconcile different peoples in Kashmir, in Sudan, both north and south, before the peace agreement. We were trying to empower women peacemakers in Yemen. We have a project now in Syria with opposition leaders and different ethnic groups to avoid a retributive conflict. And we're launching right now a program in Colombia where I've spent a number of years myself to help reintegrate tens of thousands of active or potential former combatants from the war that's been going on there for over 50 years. We're utilizing women's networks and religious and spiritual leadership there, bringing together a diverse spiritual crowd, including indigenous shamans or holy men and evangelical pastors who have entirely different ethical worldviews. The indigenous shamans see their cosmology in terms of healing and in harmony, whereas the evangelical pastors take their command from God and Jesus, in the words of Micah, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with their God. Despite their spiritual doctrinal differences, they're working together to build a spiritual safety net for those that are broken by war. And so I was in that context last month with 50 women peacemakers from different Christian religious groups, ecumenical group, in the hills of Cauca, a very conflict-impacted area in southern Colombia. Most of them were Protestant lay clergy or Catholic nuns. So I'm going to tell a story. It's going to be a Christian-based story because they were Christians. So forgive me, I hope that for those of you who are not Christian, this has some value. Okay, they each had personal stories of loss, and I'm going to draw from one of their tales to frame some of our discussion. A 70-year-old Catholic nun took the microphone at one point. She was very flamboyant and very, very energetic, and she started to tell the story in John chapter 8, where the locals grab an adulteress and drag her into the public square and throw her down in the dust in front of Jesus. And the Pharisees are standing side of him, trying to get him caught in a doctrinal trap. And they say to him, "The laws say that we must stone this woman. What do you say?" And so the nun is mimicking the people in the crowd, grabbing rocks, and mimicking Jesus drawing in the dirt while he considers his response before he gave his unforgettable reply, which we all know, that is, "Let the one among you who has not sinned cast the first stone." And so this 70-year-old nun starts to pretend she's dropping the rocks and sneaking out through the crowd so that nobody will notice her. And all of a sudden, she jumps up very dramatically, and she starts pushing her way forward again, and she says, "An old woman from the back started to come forward through the crowd, and she picked up a stone, and she let fly this stone, and she hit the adulteress in the head, and this trickle of blood ran down her face. And Jesus stood there and looked at this woman, dumbfounded, his mouth hanging open, and he said, "Mom, why do you want to embarrass me all the time in public?" Right? Mary, the one without sin. And of course, the whole crowd of women peacemakers are laughing hysterically. And the nun just stood there and she smiled and she waited for them. And then she said, "We have to beware of the dangers of our own holiness." The dangers of our own holiness. And she followed with a very impassioned and very poignant discussion about the painful effects of too easily letting our blind interpretation of doctrine cloud our ability to actually discern the spiritual needs of those with whom we're working. She also talked about peacemakers undercutting one another because of the pride of righteousness. She talked about how women oftentimes are their own worst enemies in terms of finding voice and power in institutions that are largely dominated by men. And of course, she talked about the dehumanizing violence that we commit against one another, oftentimes in the name of a loving God. So what does it mean to be a religious peacemaker? There are a lot of practical responses, and I use them oftentimes in front of groups like the U.S. State Department when I'm trying to get funding for some of our projects. But I think those of us here who work in this know that there is something distinct about faith. If we limit ourselves to just the logical and the practical, then educational programs or vocational programs should be sufficient. But it's the power of religion, the power of its illogic, that actually adds something that these other things do not have. I recently met for the first of many workshops with former combatants in Colombia's war, those who are in jail waiting for trial and to be reintegrated, and some who have already gone through the process. And there are two stories that particularly struck me that they shared with me because of their similarities. So on the one hand, you have a young man who was raised in a middle-class family as a farmer, as a cattle herder, basically. And he was taught the ways by his father, and he was taught to protect his family and to provide for his family economically. And one evening, when he was 8 years old, they brought his father in, shot several times by what his father had always called socialist traitors. And he watched his father bleed to death on the couch, and then he joined the conservative paramilitary movement to get revenge. On the other hand, there was an indigenous woman whose hero was her older brother, who taught her to fish and to hunt and to play soccer in the dusty clearings in the jungle. And they were tasked with protecting their territory from mostly corporations who would come in to try to displace them by hiring paramilitaries to get access to their natural resources. And they rarely saw the government if the government wasn't there to protect the corporate leaders. She herself, when she was 7 years old, watched from behind a tree while her entire community, her parents, her brothers and sisters, and her friends were killed with chainsaws and thrown into the local church, which was then burned to the ground as a warning to others to not join the guerrillas. So, of course, she did just that. So what job program or education program will bring these two people and the tens of thousands of women and men like them back together in community in Colombia? How will they find a way into a society that is filled with people that are damaged by war? Because there's another truth to the human spirit, the one that allowed that 70-year-old nun to sit down with the men who killed her father and with tears running down her face ask them why. And those very men, also weeping, answered that they were sorry. That is what we hold as religious peacemakers, that tool that can help us cross the gulf between being broken in pain and being restored in hope. There is a power in the spiritual element of peacemaking that flies in the face of every intellectual and visceral reality when we were talking about conflict and the destructiveness of conflict, precisely because there is something there that is larger that can hold us as we step into that breach. The very principle of greater love has been demonstrated to work again and again, but I want to be cautious about not ignoring the difficulty of the task. Again, I've heard many people in the last few days saying that we share foundations in our faith, but I want to take a slight moral journey to the other side with you with my last 3 minutes, to where our faith might present us with the risks that exist so that we can truly empathize with the other. So I end by returning to the nun in Colombia, returning to John chapter 8. But I ask you to imagine that the person that's dragged before Jesus is not the adulteress. Instead, it's a militant, someone who is engaged in the worst horrors of dehumanizing violence. In rape, murder, the soulless act of willfully taking the most precious things that can be taken from a person, their dignity, their family, their autonomy, and finally their life. And he's not there asking forgiveness. He was dragged there. And in place of Jesus, and please ignore the fact that this is a Christian metaphor, put yourself as religious peacemakers in his seat, whatever your faith tradition. But not just as religious peacemakers, but as the victim of those spiritual perversions, as the parent of a raped daughter, as the sibling of a slain soldier, or the child of a kidnapped and tortured father. All done by the hands of the man who kneels in front of you. And in place of the Pharisees, put the policymakers who encourage retributive violence, institutionalized violence, revenge, instead of peace. The purging of the venom of all of that hatred by acting on it and institutionalizing. That is the moment where religion must find its ability to do peacemaking. Not just where the challenge is difficult, but where you physically burn with the pain of the injustices that you've experienced or witnessed. Where every part of your human self wants to punish that person in front of you that's facing your judgment. You have the stone in your hand. You are right, and you are righteous. Until we can see ourselves in that position, until we can see in us the possibility that we can feel that same response, whether it be in conflict settings or whether it be in terms of greed, in terms of the environmental destruction of immediate corporate want, the failure to have a why, until we can feel that like that other person, we will not be able to use the greatest tool of spiritual peacemaking, which is empathy. We will not be able to understand and connect with that person and transform those behaviors. Beware of the dangers of your holiness, your own holiness, the nun said. And Jesus, to the adulteress, said, I will not judge you either. So, last line, to love your enemy. To love your enemy is to want them healed. And by doing so, to heal ourselves. And that is the empathy for me, that in the face of such powerful fear and rage and pain and suffering is the basis for a moral foundation for change. That is what religious faith offers, and we have to act on it in every corner of our lives, every day, every step, because not many of our experiences and our challenges, I don't think, could be quite as dramatic as the ones that some of these women I was talking to have faced. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Whoa. That was very powerful. Thank you so much. Let's express our appreciation for James. So we've had a long day. We've had a lot of speaking. Do you want to have some discussion? Can you hang in there? All right. Okay. Okay, just a minute. Someone else had their hand up back there first. Shall we do 15 minutes? Can you handle 15 minutes? Okay. I'll get you. You're number 2. Let's have you. There. You. Yeah, there's microphones.
There's one here.
Okay, so please make your questions or your comments as concise as you possibly can.
Thank you, ma'am. Members of the panel, I just...
And introduce yourself, please.
My name is Jamal Samsudin, and I'm from the Association of National Islamic NGOs of Malaysia, and a nominee of the JPNIN for this particular need. So I represent the Muslim NGOs, one of the representative. A very quick story, going back to this couple in China, Yunnan, 109 years old husband and a 106-year-old wife. So the reporter was asking them what kept them going, and they answered there's 3 principles. One, keep very busy. I'll be very brief. Keep very busy and work every day, number 1. Principle number 2 is, when facing a problem or calamity, stay cool and calm. Don't get excited and stressed. That's 2. Number 3 is be thankful for what you have.